5 News.
Tonight, with one day to go in the 2020 election cycle, we're zeroing in on the minority vote. How could it change the landscape across the state and closer to home here in Central Texas?
Plus, campaign funding is through the roof this year. Some candidates spending record amounts on close races. In the end, will it make a difference? Tonight, we're breaking it all down.
And as we make our way into Election Day Tuesday, it is looking nice here across the area. Maybe a few high clouds approaching from the west, but temperatures, it's looking good, folks. Your 25 News starts in 30 seconds.
Connecting Central Texas. This is 25 News.
The countdown is coming to an end. Tomorrow is Election Day. A lot of huge races and issues on the ballot this year, but no doubt the most significant, who will be our commander-in-chief for the next 4 years? We've seen historic turnout during early voting here in the Lone Star State as 9.7 million Texans cast their ballot.
And tomorrow is expected to be just as big. As we all gear up for the big day, 25 News has teams all across Central Texas working to bring you the latest on all you need to know. We begin our team coverage with Joel Lopez live from McLennan County. Joel?
Like you guys said, 9.7 million people early voted here in the Lone Star State, which leaves about 43% of people expected to go to the polls tomorrow. Now, the minority groups are the highest turnout or have the highest expected turnout on record this year. According to research from the Pew Institute, a projected 32 million Hispanics will be eligible to vote, compared to 30 million Black and an estimated 11 million Asians, which adds up to about a third of all eligible voters, which is why organizations such as Wake Up Temple have been focusing their efforts on making the minority voices heard.
I'm not in the business of telling people who to vote for, but I really believe that it's time for us to wake up and do the research and be active in this process, because if we're not, then we're going to continue to see the same things that we've been seeing, and which unfortunately boils down to minorities not having their voice be heard or not being represented.
Wake Up Temple has held multiple voter registration events throughout the year and even created a mobile registration van to reach low-income communities who are without transportation and people with complicated work schedules. In total, in collaboration with other organizations, they were able to register roughly 7,000 voters here in Central Texas. Now, coming up at 6, you'll hear from a local Asian organization and Hispanic representatives on how they're helping people get to the polls tomorrow. Reporting live in Waco, Joel Lopez, 25 News.
Joel, thank you. Let's look back at the 2016 election. According to CNN survey, 61% of Latinos who voted did so for Hillary Clinton. Black voters supported her by about 84%. Asian voters came in at 72%. For President Trump in 2016, 26% of Latinos went for him, again based off this survey. Black voters came in at 11%, and Asian voters had a 26% vote for Trump.
More than 10 million voters have already casted their ballots during early voting. First-time voters will play a huge role in this year's election. 25 News reporter Abby Loring has more.
Voter turnout for the 2020 election has far exceeded expectations and is largely due to Americans stepping up to cast their ballots for the first time. McLennan County is seeing a large number of first-time voters due to the presence of several colleges.
I feel like this election is like a pretty big election, especially so our generation having a impact on this and like being able to vote is pretty big.
At a table on Fountain Mall like a few days ago that was like they were giving out stickers like I am going to vote, like not I have voted yet, but it was like I'm going to vote. It was like I've never seen that before.
Students at Baylor University have even noticed a difference in the participation this election among their peers.
Yeah, I think it's less common to not vote than to vote, which is weird. Like when I turned 18, it was like nobody was really voting, and now it's like if you're not voting, it's like, oh, like why aren't you voting?
My generation of voters, everybody's really avid about it. There are a lot of voter registration events that took place on campus, which was really exciting just to see a lot of more people get involved. But I think a lot of people went out and voted.
While the ballot can be intimidating the first time around, Baylor students told 25 News they had sought out extra resources along with added research before casting their vote.
There's this one website that like lined up the issues really nicely on where the people stood.
It's a pretty easy process. I just made sure that I did my research before I submitted my vote, and that was the most important thing for me.
No matter if you're voting in person or by absentee ballot, first-time voters have all said they're excited to be able to do their part and help pave the future for our nation. The polls open starting at 7 a.m. and end at 7 p.m. For McLennan County voters, you can head to the McLennan County Elections Office website to find out which of the 34 vote centers is closest to you. For now, at Baylor University, I'm Abby Loring, 25 News.
Abby, thank you. We saw a historic early voting season in Texas this election year, and the numbers are in. Across the entire state, 9.7 million Texans cast their ballot, surpassing all of 2016's turnout of 8.9 million. Texas has added 1.8 million voters this year, with 16.9 million registered voters, while in 2016 there was 15.1 million. While over 57% voted, it falls short to the 2016 election with nearly 60%. Here in Central Texas and McLennan County, over 80,000 casted their ballots, or nearly 54% of registered voters. Nearly 47% voted in person and nearly 7% by mail. There are over 149,000 registered voters, which is over 13,000 more from 2016. In Bell County, nearly 98,000 people, or 45%, casted their votes. 40.1% voted in person, while 5.2% voted by mail. There are nearly 216,000 registered voters, which is over 29,000 more from 2016.
A rally of protesters in Houston today against drive-through voting. But now a federal judge says Texas Republicans don't have the legal standing to challenge drive-through voting there. A judge dismissing a legal effort to throw out 127,000 votes in Harris County that were done via drive-through. Those votes will now count.
Today is the final full day of campaigning, and both presidential candidates have one last shot to make their case to voters. On the eve of the election, both candidates are zeroing in on battleground states. Joe Biden in Pennsylvania and Trump stomping in 4 states, including Pennsylvania. Some of the final polling shows Biden with a lead in the Keystone State, despite the race tightening.
You know, the good news, we're going to win anyway. We're going to shove it. We're going to win anyway.
Presidents don't determine who gets to vote. Voters determine who's going to be the president.
As for election night, experts say there's a likelihood a winner will not be declared due to the challenge of counting the record number of votes. Not only might this campaign season is breaking voting records, it may also be breaking spending records too. Dennis Turner investigates.
Let's face it, political campaigns, they run on cold, hard cash, pure and simple. In the past, a lot of that money came from huge donors, corporations, and so-called political action groups. Well, that's still the case, but the biggest growth in campaign spending this year came from, are you ready for this? Us, the little guys. You think there's too much money being poured into political campaigns this year?
I do. I'm not a huge fan of over-the-top campaign spending.
And it looks like we're on track to have the most expensive campaign season ever. A report of the New York Times says, by a lot. The Center for Responsive Politics estimates candidates for the presidential and congressional races alone will reach $14 billion, double the previous high set in 2016.
Why so much money pouring into politics? Well, blame the 24-hour news cycle. It's created a campaign season that's 24/7, 365.
And voters say it too often seems to favor the same players.
It disadvantages those that are trying to step in. That's what our country is built on, anyone being able to step in and fill that role.
More and more political experts say good candidates won't run because they don't have the cash. A few millionaires have stepped in who can self-fund their campaigns to mixed results.
And anymore, money matters more than character, and I think that's extremely out of balance and not the way that we want to conduct ourselves. It's not who we are.
But isn't it? While Democrats may complain about big money politics, this year they're making more of it. Republicans, on the other hand, are a little more forgiving of successful people who run.
We are seeing more and more the idea that whoever did work hard and succeeded in what they have done is now a bad guy for working hard and succeeding. That's just totally backwards.
And a lot of voters agree with him and argue successful business people make good leaders. Chuck Schober doesn't necessarily disagree, but he says in the marketplace of ideas, it looks like the little guy who doesn't have a huge bank account gets squeezed out.
And so when you have people that are spending millions and millions and millions, it discourages average Joe Blow from stepping in and making a difference.
It's interesting to note, 22% of the total money raised in this election cycle came from people who gave $200 or less to a candidate or a cause. So while would-be politicians with small bank accounts may sit on the sidelines, voters with small bank accounts have apparently begun voting with their wallets.
Where did all that cash really come from? From what states did all those contributors send their money? The Federal Election Commission reports Washington State, California, New York, Massachusetts, Florida, and you guessed it, the state where everything is bigger, Texas, sent the most money. In our next report, we'll investigate to see where that money goes and if the candidates with the most of it really win the most elections. In Falls County, Dennis Turner, 25 News.
It's a beautiful weekend out there, a beautiful Monday. Let's get a check on our First Alert 25 forecast.
Chief Meteorologist Matt Hines is here with a look.
And it is looking very nice here across our area on this Monday evening, pre-election day. And as we take a look at the radar, get used to this because that's the way it's going to look all week, probably going into your weekend as well, as we'll have a clean scan out there. Our Extra Co Eagle Eye looking out over the Twin Bridges. We're about to approach sunset here. Yeah, it's an hour earlier now that we have turned back the clocks, that 1 hour over the weekend. And as we check out what's currently going on, temperature-wise, falling into the 60s in Waco at 69. Still holding on to the lower 70s for Temple and Killeen, right around 70, 71. And it is 69 degrees in Fairfield and 72 out in Gulfway. And as we check out our planner for this evening, looks like we'll continue to drop through the 60s between 6 and 7 o'clock, down into the 50s as we approach 8 and 9. Mostly clear skies. We may see a few high clouds as we head into tomorrow, but overall it does appear that things are going to be really nice on Election Day. So we'll talk about that and also your forecast going into next weekend and maybe the next rain chances next week coming up.
Matt, thank you. A possibility in this election could result in a tie. What would that look like? Well, we'll break it all down.
Plus, another hurricane gaining strength, this time in Central America. When will they stop? We'll have more after the break. And 25 News is your election authority. We'll be breaking down races and bringing you all of the coverage tomorrow, so make sure to tune in online and on air.